solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Ricky Hankins, Hankins.
How are you employed, sir?
I am a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, also known as ATF.
How long have you worked in law enforcement?
I have worked for ATF since April 2001.
And what is your, are you a certified fire investigator?
I am.
What is that?
A certified fire investigator means that I have received specialized training in order to investigate fire origin and cause.
Can you just summarize what that is, the training?
The training for ATF was a 2-year immersion program where I had to take graduate courses from the University of Maryland. I had to investigate a minimum of 100 fire scenes under the mentorship of more senior ATF CFIs. I had to do a research project. I had to do reading reports. At the end of it, I had to take written tests. And I'm also an International Association of Arson Investigators, CFI, through their process as well.
How long have you been a CFI?
I have been an ATF CFI since 2009.
Back on or about April 5th, 2024, were you asked to assist in the search and processing of a 2020 Honda Civic?
Correct.
Where did that occur?
That occurred at 3811 West Lincoln, the secure impound lot for the Milwaukee Police Department.
Among the people present for that was yourself as well as Detective Alexis Krusik, who just left this room, correct?
That is right.
And then there were additional personnel present from the Milwaukee Police Department as well as the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. Is that correct?
That is correct.
After doing that search, were you tasked with conducting an origin and cause determination?
I was.
What is the purpose of an origin and cause determination?
An origin and cause investigation starts with determining where a fire starts. The purpose of an origin and cause investigation is to determine where a fire starts and how it started, to determine if it's an accident, if possible, or an intentional act. Sometimes we can't tell the difference and we have to leave a fire undetermined.
In this case, after you conducted that search with those other people, were you able to come to a conclusion as to origin and cause of this fire?
Yes.
Can you tell us basically the process? Take us through it.
In order to get to the final conclusion, the first thing we look at is origin. And to put it simply, when you're looking for the origin of the fire, we're looking at materials or locations that do not look like their immediate surroundings. So mass loss is different, so things are just burned away, and there's not as much left of an area as its immediate surroundings. So there's mass loss, there's discoloration, all right? There's deposit, there's deformation, melting, warping. When we see areas like that, we explore those areas as potential areas of origin, keeping in mind that the greatest area of fire damage or greatest area of mass loss doesn't always mean origin. Sometimes that mass loss is caused by ventilation. So if ventilation comes in an area, that can cause more mass loss. So we explore first origin. Once we're comfortable with where a fire starts, then we look for what are the first fuels, what's capable of burning in that area, and what are our heat sources. Are there any accidental potential heat sources that could have come in contact with our fuel load? Are they capable of igniting what's in that area? Once we explore that and we test that with prior knowledge, sometimes we have to do fire research testing at our lab out in Maryland. We have a large warehouse that sometimes we have to rebuild complete structures and test fire to see which of our hypothesis might be correct. If we are able to come to a hypothesis that withstands all scrutiny and only one hypothesis remains, then we draw a conclusion.
Does this involve an assessment of the exterior damage as well as to the interior damage of the vehicle?
That's correct.
Can you tell us what you noticed when you did an exterior assessment?
Of the 2020 Honda Civic, there was oxidation to the sunroof area, and there was also oxidation to the exterior passenger side doors.
What is that?
Oxidation is discoloration. So one of those things I was telling you that we're looking for is the discoloration. So there's a whitening or a peeling of the exterior paint from those doors.
I'm going to put on the screen here for you Exhibit 60. It doesn't matter what the video is. You're talking about this discoloration right around here?
That is correct.
Let's talk about the interior damage assessment. What did you observe?
When we were looking at the interior of the Honda Civic, we looked first at the engine compartment, and then we looked at the trunk. The interior of those compartments, the engine compartment, there was no indication of direct flame damage. There was no fire damage indicating that the fire started in the engine compartment. Same with the trunk. There was a little bit of mass loss or flame damage to contents of the trunk that were immediately adjacent to the back seat. Well, that's because the back seat had burned away from a fire from the passenger compartment and had extended a limited extension into the trunk.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Looking at the passenger compartment, so the front seats, the back seats, we had heavy mass loss to contents as well as the seating, both the backrests, and there's more survivability to the seat cushion, but the backrests for the two front bucket seats and the backrests for the rear seat were uniformly consumed. And so it was very clear that the fire had originated inside the passenger compartment.
All right, and for the record, while you were talking, I put up Exhibit 62, which has already been admitted. That would be an image of the interior compartment, correct?
Correct.
What can you tell us about the windows?
When I examined the windows, I had a lot of window remnants deep inside the window wells, indicative of the windows being at least partially open during the fire event.
Let's talk about excavation. What happened? What did you notice through that?
So like I said before, when we determined origin, and that being the passenger compartment, we started excavating, looking for what are our fuel loads. The back seat, I remember seeing a fleece blanket, which I believe we see here in this photograph. There were remnants of cardboard, remnants of paper material. I do recall, I believe, a purse in the back seat. There was also remnants of a Bic lighter, I recall seeing in the back seat. And as we excavated further now into the front of the passenger compartment, I reached the area of the floorboard on the front passenger side. So front passenger bucket seat, right at foot level. During excavation, I located what appeared to be remnants of a stuffed animal, green in color, at least majority of it green that had survived. And as soon as I turned it over, I was overwhelmed by an odor consistent with the possible presence of a petroleum distillate. It smelled like, sometimes we can't tell what it is, but it could be gasoline, it could be lighter fluid, it could be any kind of petroleum distillate. But whatever this stuffed animal was appeared to have been saturated with it because it had weight to it. And it was an overwhelming odor that I experienced.
Are you able to say, when you were in that front passenger compartment, whether or not the seats would have been able to be moved after the fire was extinguished?
No, they were not.
How could you tell?
When fire occurs and is extinguished, it creates what's called protective patterns. So pretend that there's a fire up here at the desk that I'm sitting at, and this is more of a solid, not a light combustible. If this is in place at the time of the fire, and the fire department puts out the fire, and we move this after the fact, this is called a protected area underneath this item, right? So just like that example, if something is moved, a seat, for example, after the fire, after the extinguishment, you would see a protected area or a disjarment or unalignment of the fire debris.
Going back to that odor of petroleum distillate, are you able to tell us what some examples of petroleum distillates are?
Oh, gasoline, diesel, lighter fluid, solvents, paint thinners.
Thank you. You participated in the, actually, before I go there, that item that you sensed that odor from was collected by the sheriff's office?
That's right.
You participated as well in the x-ray of the vehicle?
I did.
Did you observe any remnants of weapons or keys?
We did not.
What was the weather like on the day of the fire?
I believe it was light rain.
And is that something you would take into account during your analysis?
The weather in general, yes.
Okay. So to recap, go from front to back. The engine compartment of the trunk was not fire damaged.
Correct.
You could rule that out as the origin location.
That's accurate.
The trunk you also ruled out. How so?
Looking at the trunk, there was survivability, no direct flame damage to the majority of the trunk. We located remnants, if I recall correctly, bed sheet, female clothing in the back or in the trunk. No flame damage to those contents. If a fire originates in the trunk, there's going to be flame damage.
If the trunk is closed at the time of the fire, that would be an impediment because of lack of oxygen, correct?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Why would the trunk being opened or closed matter about the fire's ability to spread in the trunk?
In order to have combustion, in order to have fire, you need three things: oxygen, fuel, fuel, and a heat source. All right. So if you take away oxygen, there won't be fire. There won't be combustion.
Within the passenger compartment of the vehicle, while the window's down, there clearly would have been oxygen then, right?
That's correct.
Are you aware of, actually to finish up where I was going then, so that leaves us with the passenger compartment. Were you able to conclude that's where the fire started?
Yes.
All right, and just summarize how.
Based on the direct flame damage, the mass loss to the contents, as well as the seat cushions, was indicative of a fire coming from that area, originating in that area.
And are you able to come to a conclusion based on your examination, training, and experience as to how the fire started?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what your conclusion is and how you come to that conclusion?
Based on three main bullet points or data points, one being the presence of ignitable liquid, because at the time of my rendering of my report, I received a lab report from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab indicating a medium petroleum distillate was found in the stuffed animal debris. Witness statements is also something we take into consideration when we're determining origin and cause, and a witness statement was reported that they had seen an individual walking away from the 2020 Honda Civic after throwing what the witness claimed appeared to be a lit lighter into the driver window. And then the third final bullet point that was important for consideration was the registered owner had been determined to be deceased and not the driver of the vehicle at the time of the fire.
Are you able to give us any information as to how fast a fire started in that manner could spread in a car like that?
Quickly, ignitable liquid accelerates fires.
I have no other questions.
Cross.
Okay, so to back up a little bit. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just to back up a little bit, I think what you were saying towards the end is that before you even begin your examination of the vehicle, you read witness statements and do a try to learn a little bit about the circumstances. Would that be fair to say?
Not always before we do an examination of the vehicle. I believe I'm not sure when I learned of that witness statement. That would have been after the scene exam.
Okay, you prepared an opinion and cause report though, right?
Origin and cause, correct.
Origin and cause report, right?
Correct.
And you drafted that report and it has sections such as synopsis, narrative, and participants, right?
Correct.
And there's a section in there specifically entitled witness statements, right?
That's correct.
And that's because of what people say is important to know,
Correct.
as well as doing your own independent examination, because sometimes what people say is different than what actually happened.
Sometimes.
It's part of the reason why you go in and do an examination is to try to see if that version makes sense, for example, right?
We compare witness statements to physical evidence all the time.
And that's what you did here, right?
Yes.
Now, the bottom line, I guess the bottom line conclusion, if you will, is that the Honda Civic was lit on fire.
It was an intentionally set fire.
Not something that happens from the engine, right?
Correct.
And it's your conclusion that the intentionally set fire was a stuffed animal lit on fire and placed on the passenger side of the car. Do I have that right?
You do not have that right.
Okay, can you explain your conclusion?
So as I stated in my conclusion, it was the application of a open flame to ignitable liquid inside the passenger compartment. When ignitable liquid is used to start a fire or accelerate a fire, it's not pertinent for us to pinpoint exactly where that fire starts because, for example, if I poured gasoline throughout this room and lit it on fire after the fact, we wouldn't be able to distinguish where I actually put the open flame to the gasoline. Was it in the back corner or in the front corner? Because the damage is going to spread so quickly that the mass loss, the fire damage, isn't going to tell us where that poured gasoline, that poured ignitable liquid was first ignited. So my conclusion, if I believe my report is in front of you, is that it was an open flame ignition of a ignitable liquid, medium petroleum distillate, inside the passenger compartment.
Something like gasoline.
Medium petroleum distillate was the lab report.
Right, and you said before on direct that could be gasoline. Use that as an example.
A petroleum distillate is not a medium, gasoline is not a medium petroleum distillate.
Lighter fluid would be a medium.
Correct.
What we use to light a grill, right?
That is accurate.
Okay, so your conclusion is that something like that was used, right?
Correct.
On a stuffed animal.
That included a stuffed animal.
Well, there was you made particular note of the stuffed animal, didn't you? That the stuffed animal had an overwhelming odor of the medium petroleum distillate, right?
That's correct.
Which tells you, based on your experience, that stuffed animal, you believe, was sprayed or doused with that liquid, right?
Right. I think where we're missing each other is I did not say, nor would I say, that is the only location in the vehicle that had ignitable liquid doused or applied.
Right. The liquid could have been sprayed all over, as far as you know.
Correct.
Okay. Do you aware of any witnesses who saw someone spraying lighter fluid all over a vehicle?
No.
The only witness statement you're aware of is from a person who claims that a lit lighter was thrown into a driver's window from outside of a vehicle.
Correct.
And in fact, you found part of a Bic lighter on the back of the vehicle, right?
That's correct.
When you say Bic lighter, are you referring to the standard thing you would buy at a gas station? Is that what it looked like?
Correct.
The kind where a person would use to light a cigarette, right?
True.
You're, as an arson investigator or ATF employee, certainly you know that a Bic lighter, if a person lights it, the moment they let go of where their thumb would go, the moment they let go, the flame goes out, right?
Some lighters have a locking mechanism where you can lock the flame down.
Did this one have that?
I did not recover it, so I did not examine that.
So you don't know?
I don't.
And but you do know that the four windows were all likely open at least partially, right? At least partially open at the time of the fire, right?
Correct.
And that's based on the uniform fire mass loss, right? Or no, I'm sorry, that's based on the debris that you noticed in the window sills, right?
Right. The window channel had significant glass still in it.
How far down were the windows at the time?
We weren't able to tell that. That's why I said at least partially down.
So it could be anywhere from just a tiniest little fraction down to fully?
No, we had more glass in the window channels than just a tiny bit.
Okay, so you're
I
looking.
can't quantify it for you.
Well, in the pictures we saw.
Mostly up there. There are two right here.
Well, if we take picture 61, exhibit 61, for example. Oh, thank you. If we take exhibit 61, for example, what does that show? Well, how do the windows look there?
The
windows
windows
are-
are gone.
What?
The windows are not evident in that picture.
They're gone, right?
Correct.
And so when you examined the vehicle, the windows themselves were already gone, right?
Like I said, I was able to see down into the window channels inside the door.
And why would windows be gone? Is that because the fire department personnel would knock them out?
Or the fire could have compromised them and they failed due to heat.
In other words, the fire could have cracked them.
But they were also down.
Now, the seat, in terms of the seat distance being back, before you were holding up a Kleenex box and moving it around in front of you, weren't you?
Correct.
As a demonstrative?
Correct.
Okay, so I want to understand the seat location in the vehicle. Is that something that you examined?
I did.
You look at how far back the seat is on the metal tracks, right?
We did in this case.
Okay, and in terms of was the driver's seat all the way back, as far as it can go?
We did not manipulate it to see if it was all the way back as far as it would go. We just made note of where it was at that time.
Okay,
At the time of the fire.
Okay, so you didn't note how far back on the tracks it was itself.
No.
But it's your opinion that it wasn't moved by fire department personnel because why?
Again, if it had been moved, we would have had clean parts of the track. So if the seat is on a track,
Right.
everyone knows that. So if you move it after soot deposits, after a flame impinges upon it, it's going to then expose a clean part of the track. We didn't have that.
Well, did you have clean part? Right. Were there parts of the track that were clean and parts of it that had soot on it, or no?
There was I don't recall the exact visual of the tracks. We could tell that they had not moved, the seat had not moved from the time of the fire.
That's fine. Thank you, that's all.
If you had not had the witness statements, would your opinion about where the fire originated have changed?
No.
If you had not had witness statements, would your opinion about it being a result of an ignition of an ignitable liquid changed?
No.
Was the fire incendiary?
It was.
Meaning what?
It was an intentional act.
Nothing else.